Welcome back. Now we've looked at the problems that still affect Nigeria's educational system, and now it's time to talk some possible solutions to the education system in Nigeria. Still staying with us is Sade Adefisayo, an educationist, as well as Bolaji Osime. Thank you very much, ladies, for staying with us. Now it's time to talk solutions. One of the issues that has raised this ugly head is that in the manifestos and plans of actions from different political parties so far, we've not heard anything from the politicians when it comes to education. Now we've talked about the problems that persist in the Nigerian public education system, but can you take us through some of the statistics that you have, Ma, on the gaps that still are present in Nigerian educational institutions and how to get things right?
What should the politicians who want to take over come February 16, come March 2nd, be telling us at this point regarding education in Nigeria, essentially?
Yes, but the statistics first.
Well, the statistics, when we talk about the number of schools, when you talk about the problems with education, one major one is access. There are just not enough schools. They're not enough, for instance, in Lagos State, I understand that 80% of the children in Lagos State go to private schools. The essence of this is that what this means is that the children of the very poor are not going to school. Because there are only 1,000 public primary schools, and there are so many underserved communities. So the children in those communities whose parents cannot even afford the very lowest of school fees just stay at home. And so we have a rising out-of-school children population, which has not been verified.
13.2 so far.
For the country. Still one of the highest, if not the highest in the world. Which is a terrible statistic.
But in the last years, what has then the state government been doing? Because we have allocations. Does it mean they are painting walls and fixing bulbs? No new schools?
They are not building schools. They are not building new schools.
So why is that?
Well, I'm not a politician. I think the politicians can answer that question.
Given that education is basic and we are the ones who actually put them there. So I'm asking that because if they are not building schools and we know they are not doing it, then what are we doing to tell them that you're not doing anything in education?
Well, I think we have to hold them accountable and responsible. I think we got to a stage where people started saying government cannot do it by itself, which is true, but government is accountable, government is responsible. And my own thinking about this is that we should hold government responsible for providing education to its poorest citizens, to all its citizens. And if you do that, if public schools become good, can you imagine a lot of children will go to school. A lot of the private schools that are providing really poor quality education will generally just wither on the vine.
Bolaji, let's also have your reaction, because if we are supposed to take cues and then learn lessons from local and international front, we look at Rwanda, for example, which is partnering with international organizations to ensure that public schools are equipped enough in terms of facility, personnel, and a whole lot more. And then private schools are now being shut down, have been shut down. So aren't we supposed to be taking cues and learning lessons? What should we be doing in Nigeria now when it comes to investment in public institutions, schools?
I worry. I would advocate for governments to open more schools, but not the kind of learning that's happening in the schools now, because there's no point opening the schools and they're not getting the learning that will take them far. So, which is what will happen, because that's why I will always advocate a PPP situation. Let us have a private sector partnership situation. And with technology now, you can do a lot from a distance of educating a child, because even in the north, which is even more rampant, which is the worst, the figures are so much more worse than Lagos State, they're getting educated under the tree. Because I know that DFID has done a lot of work in the north, and what they do is that they put the curriculum on the HD in the phone, and the student is able to actually educate themselves. And they found that within a few months, they were actually speaking English and they were learning. So technology has allowed us, and that's what some of the partners who have come into Nigeria have used in places like Edo State, where they've welcomed them. They came to Lagos, but Lagos didn't accept the partnership.
But Lagos generates a whole lot of revenue, and we're seen Lagos is seen as one of the states that has the capacity to be able to embrace all of these technologies and implement
earlier on I had
these.
said that until the government connects education to the economy and its GDP. Lagos State is about 360 something billion that they earn, IGR. But they can do a lot more. California is the fourth or fifth largest economy in the world, California, and it's a state. So it's using its human capital. California doesn't have oil. It's using technology. It's using, human capital. So you go to universities, they're doing innovations. And Lagos State is in that place, it's in that spot, because you have a lot of educated people here, a lot of entrepreneurs here. So Lagos State should be in the forefront, because Lagos State, if it leads and does it, most states will follow what Lagos is doing. So what we've been saying to Lagos State is use your human capital, educate your human capital. You have Code Lagos, for example. So they're on the same pathway. They know it's a knowledge economy we're talking about now. We're no longer talking about industrial economy. Everybody's on their iPads, so I can learn so much here. There are a lot of people in Yaba who have been employed by Silicon Valley in America, and they're Yaba, and they're being employed, and they're being paid. So the world is flat now. So what we're saying is that the digital native, the new the generation that we have, these young people, can learn faster using technology. So please don't restrict them to classroom, a teacher standing in front of them and teaching them. Open them up to the world. So yes, we can beam lessons into the classrooms in Lagos State. I can stay in my own, we've said it, we've said to them, look, I have a school, my teachers who are very good teachers, who are champions, can teach your students, even on a Saturday. They don't even have to come to your premises. We can beam it into that, and they get good quality education. I'd rather have teachers who are very well trained, but of course we'll also train their teachers. We don't want them to abdicate their responsibility. But where we are at now, I'm so concerned about the Nigerian child, that they are missing out on so much more because of the lack of education. So how do we bridge the gap until government understands that it's its responsibility to educate its citizens? So that is where private sector can come in. And we can partner with them, provide quality education, like the doctor school that is happening in Lagos State now. So people are going into classrooms and they're training the teachers, and the teachers are doing so much more better, like that. So we can do that to bridge the gap, but government must rise up to the responsibility, put more money in educating the Zuckerbergs of this world. Or just, if you go, near VFS in
geniuses all around.
A 21-year-old is selling recharge card. Hello, somebody. A 21-year-old, this is the youth of this nation that should really be harnessing the potential of all the resources, educated, and everybody just passes them and leaves them. And then at night they become armed robbers and they are complaining.
So in your scorecard of optimism, do you think we can replicate what's happening in Rwanda and the likes of Liberia as well anytime soon, rating it over 10?
Oh, yes. Because there are low-hanging fruits in education. Technology is a low-hanging fruit. Yes. If you use technology, and because children naturally gravitate towards it, if you teach them using technology, they get excited and they learn. And there are other things. Look, improving teachers' lots. The quality of teachers. Even not just that, in making the profession a more exciting profession to be a member of. If you ask people now, nobody wants to go to school to read education. The private universities, only 1 or 2 are offering education. Because parents don't want to pay me 2 million naira for their child to go and read education. When the child will come out and be earning 10,000 or 15,000 naira. So if there are these low-hanging fruits that if we address, can actually change education. Because Nigerians are so smart.
Yes. Yes.
When you deal with Nigerians, you are excited. That when you deal, I've worked in a public school. I worked in a public school with children who ostensibly were not smart, but I was amazed at the wit they have, the smartness of their mind, the quickness with which they would grab concepts and so on. So long as you made the environment friendly for them and they enjoy school. So I think I'm optimistic.
No, it calls to mind the need to reprioritize, yes, for the government of the day. And of course, we know we are in an election year, and soon enough we're going to have new leaders at different levels. So how do we begin to reprioritize and to tell ourselves that education is actually the new oil, as it were? Where do we start from?
Education is the new oil. There's no doubt about it. I think it's how to convince politicians. Like Bolaji said, how will they see that value chain from the child in nursery to the economy of the state. How do we convince them? So I think for those of us who have been fighting in this or working in this reformers ecosystem for so long, I think it's how do we get them to understand that if education affects everything. When someone, you know, the guy who brought me here today didn't know how houses are numbered. You know, there's the odd side of the road, there's the even side of the road. He didn't know that. He didn't know that. That I put down to poor quality education, because I think as a child, I knew that there's the odd side of the road, there's the even side of the road. The little things like crossing the road anyhow. There's so many things that come back to education. It's not just the economy, it's even social relationships, social cohesion. When a bus driver breaks traffic lights, I mean, just because he wants to get to the park first, it's all part of being poorly educated. We're all going to get there eventually.
But then we know in Nigeria we have lots of people. We have even a thuggery. We know we have lots of people in the parks. And the problem is that, from what I know, is that many of them make a lot of money. So how do you convince someone who is out there on the street, possibly a woman who is a beggar, to take her child to school? That's on our own side, because the solution doesn't rest solely with the government. No. It's also about the orientation that we have as Nigerians, that education is important. So where do we bridge the gap between having the government act and the people, especially those who need the education, recognizing that it is actually very basic? Where do we begin to address that?
I think compulsory education to junior secondary school for every government that knows what it's doing, and making sure compulsory is compulsory, which means you're implementing it. You're getting them off the street and getting them into school. They wouldn't know you are doing them a favor at that stage. It's only when primary school, in America, high school is why they do the graduation, because by high school, if I graduated you can do anything with your life. So what we're saying is that our primary school, make sure we give them, when we were growing up, primary school was like an exit for a lot of people who went out, and they were able to get a job, and then they could come back in. So governments must make sure, because the people wouldn't do it. Because I'd rather take my child on the street to go and sell oranges and all of that, because I think the money is coming. And I think the APC government tried to do a cash transfer by giving money to the mother, allowing the child to go. So the government must have a policy. I think it's a policy issue. If this government or any government that is coming in is really serious about the fact that they want to look after the citizens, and any citizen also should be asking for the government now that, look, we want education. That is the only way we're going to escape poverty. That is the only way we're going to get a job. We want the skills. So they must make it mandatory. So your child must be in school till at least 9 years. Okay. After 9 years, at least we've done a bit as a government. Then you can now get a job. But then also, not only getting into school, make sure it's quality education. That's all you can give to this young people.
Sade, one of the issues that's been pressing is the recurring strikes by the Academic Staff Union of Universities, and they've said, well, they are having all of these strikes because, first and foremost, government has not shown any strong commitment to the negotiations that they've had, so that's why we've had the strike. Students are still at home, and nothing is happening. The curriculum has been breached, as it were.
Since
and they also
November
say, yes, since November, and they also say, well, if you are not ready to invest in the educational sector, we can't have the Bunton burner, we can't have the XYZ infrastructure put in place to give the quality education we are looking out for. So strike will continue, but there are talks that are ongoing. But do you think that at this point where we are, we also appreciate the resource, that's the teaching force that drives education in Nigeria? Talking about negotiations and staying with the commitments.
It's a very, very interesting question, because you've asked many things in one. As for the strike, my feeling always is everybody loses.
Yeah.
Even the teachers are going to lose, because you see that by the time, you see, many years when these things started, when universities started going on strike, lecturers too had to survive. And during that period, you had people with PhDs and so on selling chicken, selling soft drinks and so on. And when school started again, many just, that was more lucrative. So you can see immediately that we would have lost a lot of cerebral capital that way. And so everybody loses. It's very painful. But I agree that we have not accepted the role of the teacher in education. Everybody, all studies show that the most critical factor in any school system anywhere in the world is the quality of teaching and learning. If you get that right, a lot of things will go. Even if you have a bad curriculum, taught by a good teacher, it can become a potent instrument. But once you don't get teaching right, and teaching is not just pay. Pay is part of it. Teaching is also all these conditions of service, training the teachers. They're training in undergrad, they're training in colleges of education. You see, all those things come together to bring a really formidable teaching workforce. If we don't get teaching right, we will not get most things right. And so that's why sometimes one is like, who's going to win from all this? It's a classic lose-lose.
Yeah. But Ma, somebody also said one of the issues, like you also pointed, you wouldn't be surprised if you find out that the laboratory in the school you went to is still having the same facility. So that's one of the things that they're saying that, well, it has to be corrected or the strike continues. Now, are you expecting any new twist of fate when it comes to having all of these settlements from the government saying that, okay, we commit and then we're going to have our word?
They've been committed. I mean, they'll say yes, and they'll discuss, they'll agree, and then they renege. That's been the main problem over many years, that agreements are just not.
But having the way forward now, since we're looking for solutions?
I think we have to. There's no doubt that we must find the funds to invest in education. To invest in the infrastructure of education, yes, it's all part of it. It's extremely important that we, like we said, how can somebody use the Bunsen burner I used? It's probably obsolete. How can you look at the periodic table? How can I, for instance, teach anybody the periodic table anymore? Many things have happened since I left school. So it's quite clear that we have to invest significantly and prioritize. And for me, the priority areas for lecturers and teachers is always the content, their skills.
But they say they are forcing the strike so that we have an idea that there must be a political will. Is there any
No, the
valuable
political
stance
will
there?
is always number one. You see, even if you look across states, because if you look across states in this country, states are responsible for basic education, for secondary education. It differs from state to state, and it's because of that very that I don't know, is it nebulous or what? It's a factor you can't really hold your hand to. Political will.
Yeah.
If there is political will, they will prioritize. They will say what is most important for our children. But many of the things that we do, what's most important for me as a political person in the state, but if they have the political will, they can turn around the fortunes of these universities very quickly.
Obviously, some of all of these challenges, even when we have the quality of teaching and we say that it's poor, it boils down to how much training the teachers are exposed to. So how do we address the question of training for our teachers to be sure that we have the right teachers teaching the future leaders of Nigeria? How do we get to the point where training becomes something that we are proud of? Do we need to take our teachers abroad? How do we achieve proper training for Nigerian teachers?
I think the government has a lot of provisions, like TEPO in Lagos, a lot of provisions for training. Everything on paper is always there. The challenge is that it's not implemented. We in the private sector are accountable to parents. So if you bring your child to me and the child fails, the parent will say, look, I paid this amount of money. So we have continuous training programs in the private sector. So we train our teachers practically all the time. But in government, they're not accountable to anybody per se. Like I said earlier when I was talking, is that the policymakers are in Abuja. The implementation is done in the state level. The commissioner of education sometimes is the deputy governor. So, we've set ourselves up for failure. So that's the challenge. So these teachers in fact, we have trained Lagos State teachers on their core project. We actually trained them. And what you find, in fact, we took directors to Ghana. When I was working with DFID as the ESPN leader, we took directors to Ghana, and they were stunned when we got to Ghana and they saw their contemporaries making presentations. They just sat like this and they were looking. They were upset. They said, look, they never give us the opportunity to do this. It's not that we can't do it, but we don't have the opportunity. So the thing is that the government will have a fund for training. It will have put it on paper, but they do it sometimes, but they don't do it to the extent because nobody is really monitoring and nobody's really asking questions. And then the learning outcomes, you know, WAEC, up until now, I think it was about, what, 13% pass rate? So, you know, when you want to judge a teacher, you look at the result of the child.
That's true.
So the child is not doing well and you're still keeping that teacher there. There's a problem there.
Okay.
Are you also impressed by the slash of the cost for JAM forms, which was from 5,000 to 3,500, NECO SSE fees from 11,350 to about 9,850, and then basic education 5,000 to 4,000?
It's all right.
Does that show any commitment?
It's all right.
Well, do they have the places for, because more people are going to apply for universities.
Look,
Yes.
Now, because
how many people are applying?
We have
1.8 already.
300,000
How many
people
spaces do we have?
applying for JAMB in just 1 week.
Exactly, in 1 week.
How many
300,000.
spaces do we have in the universities?
That is it. That's the question.
So we are using, you see, the way I look at it is our solutions are often like putting a plaster on a cancerous wound.
I'm telling you.
It won't work. It won't work. You have to find out the root cause, and we don't do proper root cause analysis. The problem with getting into university is so difficult. And even when you back it down to things like exam malpractice, it's because this thing is what you call high stakes.
Yes.
What I used to tell my students when I was in school is, when I was still running schools, was, look, WAEC is a gatekeeper. And if that gate is slammed against you, that's just it.
That's it.
And so it becomes it's a matter of life and death. There are no alternatives. You just have to pass WAEC and go to university. And universities have only 500,000 spaces. And 1.8 million of you are sitting for this
Already.
exam. And now you've reduced
Slash
the
the
fees,
fees
so
again.
maybe 2 to 3 million will sit.
And then you make
but
the
the
money.
carrying capacity is still 500,000.
Now, in wrapping up conversations, do you think we also have to review our 63334 format? Because at the end of the day, our earlier conversations said we have to also invest in vocational institutions.
That's true.
How much of reformation do you think we should have within these lines and have vocational institutions in the country so that we can have a better educational system for people who actually want to learn carpentry or electrical engineering and whatever?
It's already part of the 633. So you have a track that goes, if you're going to university, once you get to junior secondary school, GSS3, you can either decide that you're going to go to the technical colleges,
But
5 of them in
vocational
Lagos.
training institutes well equipped?
What Lagos State has done, which is awesome, with ECHO project funded by World Bank, was to get private sector to partner with them. So Samsung, for example, at Agidingbi, you know, so an MTN. So what they do is that they bring the equipment. The important thing about vocational is that you must be able to have a practical experience on the machines and equipment that the company that you are going to join in future is using. So if you're looking at cars that are all computerized now, you cannot be using the technical know-how of 19th century of the cars that were made there. So an Elizade can partner with them and say, okay, I'm doing Toyota, so I'll bring my cars, I'll bring my equipment, or you can come to me. So that's what Lagos State has done. So, and it doubled the intake immediately into vocational schools. Okay. Lagos State has done a wonderful job partnering, and then now World Bank is now thinking of actually now intervening in over 21 technical colleges. You know about the Mambila project. The Mambila project is coming up in Taraba State. Taraba State has just 1 technical college, and there's a 30% local content that says 30% of the employee, whatever, must come from Nigeria. And yet we don't have the qualification of that 30%. So what they're saying with the Mambila project is this is billions of dollars that we're borrowing, yet we'll not be able to employ our citizens.
People.
So what World Bank is now saying is that let us quickly get into the technical colleges, partner with them, equip them with the skills. So, and we're not looking at for big skills, we're looking at blue-collar jobs, you know, artisans. Because when you are doing a Mambila project, it's construction.
Exactly.
So in Dangote, for example, now wants a lot of bricklayers. So they can roll out. So we can actually equip and employ a lot of Nigerians if we can get the technical colleges working well. And luckily, the donor agencies are also looking at that. So it's a win-win situation. Government is... if we continue to talk about government in Nigeria, do this, we're not going to move. That's the truth. Until they'll get their act together, we'll get the right president we want. But until then, we must grab the help we have, which means the donor agencies, the private sector partners. So in this case, the Dangote is going to come on board and say, yes, I'm going to train them. Then World Bank will bring the money. So we can please continue to help the Nigerian child. whilst we wait for government to wake up.
I would like
Do you
to butt
understand?
in here quickly because we know that one thing about Nigerian politics is that there is hardly continuity. After this administration, how are we sure that some of these lofty projects, like the technical colleges coming on board, are going to be sustained? So what conversation and engagement should we be having at this point with the politicians who will run for political office during the elections? Let me come to you,
And remember,
Sade.
there's a debate that is holding tomorrow as
That's
well.
true.
So the presidential candidates will be speaking their
Interesting.
Yeah,
minds.
that's right.
What questions should we be asking?
I think many of them, from what they've said, don't really understand the issues. They've not done a deep enough dive into what's happening in education. So I think what we owe them all is to ask them, look, this is to let them know, like all the information that Bolaji has shared, this is happening. What are you going to do about it? You know, I think these are some of the questions that we just have to ask. We can't be pussyfooting and hoping that you know, they'll do something about it when many of them don't even know, don't even care, don't even understand the impact of education on this country. You know, we all think in terms of our children. So you send your children abroad, they go to school, they come back. What are they going to be working with?
Exactly.
And so no, I think we've got to help politicians by informing them and then holding them accountable, asking them questions. I'm always tweeting, asking funny questions. And,
Right.
And it's also important because
tweeting,
the
yeah.
media is critical
Yeah,
as well.
yeah.
Because you guys get to go to and all I see media do is just taking pictures. And, you know, you guys are not asking questions.
Yeah.
So it's good for the media also to get
That's
the
why we're
knowledge.
having
get
this
informed.
conversation.
Yeah,
To get informed.
But not just talk to us. You two need to go and dig. I'm sure
We
you have a
believe that
research. I know that
That they are listening.
you guys are going to do a wonderful job
Yes.
because I mean we know you're the owner of the company, so he's going to do a wonderful job because he's really passionate about education. But
Thank
you know,
you.
when you look at press conferences in the US, you see how they throw hard questions.
Yes.
Sometimes when I listen to some media people, they ask some silly. I say, "Well, this is valuable opportunity to get these guys on the spot. Let them answer the question to the whole world because everybody's watching." So we also have to do our homework.
Wow.
And then the other thing I will say is that also we need to get our government, in terms of sustainability, we need to have a way that the Federal Minister of Education, whether they're going to set up a committee or a team, must transcend political, all this politics. They must transcend all these elections, let me put it that way. So if I'm a governor, for example, I must be able to get a team that is, there's a continuity going on. So even if I change, you know, governors change,
And
there's
stop
still a
politicizing
way.
the
structure is still in
It's
place.
still in place. So that we just don't drop everything and then somebody takes it.
Because that's
you know?
exactly what happens.
That is
all
what
the
happens,
time.
and everybody now starts. The
Starts
education
all
reforms
over
we talked
again.
about.
The structure is there.
Changing things.
It's the implementation of that
Yes.
structure. As a child of civil, I'm the child. You are also the child of civil servants. They transcended, and that's the
Yes,
word.
they did.
Politics.
They did.
Every government that came in, they knew it was their duty
Yes.
to update them, to let them. They
Exactly.
were not openly.
That's why we have
partisan or
permanent
anything.
Permanent
secretaries.
secretaries.
Yes, that's why they are
The super
permanent.
permanent
Yes.
secretaries.
So
That's why
that
they were-
from
Yes,
regime to regime, they are
exactly.
able to say, look, these were the decisions that we reached. What are you going to do about this? Instead, begin again.
So beyond the politicians, civil servants do your work.
Yeah.
Hopefully we get things right,
Precisely.
and definitely the conversations will continue
Please.
where we talk hard talk, right?
Yes,
Not
yeah.
nasty,
Those
yeah.
hard questions.
It's been a pleasure speaking
Thank
with
you
you,
so
ladies.
much.
We've been speaking with Sade Adefisayo, an educationist. Thank you very much, ma'am, for your time,
Thanks
as
for
well as
coming.
Bolaji Osime as
Wow.
well.
Thank you so much for staying with us. Of course, it's been wonderful on Nigeria Decides
Most
today.
definitely.
Lots of issues, and education is critical, so ensure that every child around you gets educated. Don't forget that Nigeria Decides continues on Monday. I am Ife Aaron, and of course...
And I am David Alabi. It's important to also watch the presidential debate tomorrow to be able to question the hard question. Do have a good evening.